Good evening, everyone. Today's session is on basics of C language. In this session, we will be learning about the C language. What are the basics? What is the history of C? What are the operators? What are variables? And how we use those variables and operators in a program. So let us begin with the session. C is a language which is basically nowadays is the base for other languages also. Like if I'm going to teach C language, right? And the student, like I'm teaching Python. The student does not have the knowledge of what are the data types, what are variables, what are identifiers, so what are looping concepts, what are iterations. So before starting any programming language, because Python is much advanced language and it is very simple to use also, right? And it has its own advantages, like using the number of applications are there that can be built through Python, but C has its own importance. If you know C language, you can learn any language. So this is the advantage of C, right? Now let us see the history, the base of C. C was originally developed in 1970s by Dennis Ritchie at Bell Labs, right? C is a high level and it is a procedural or general purpose structured programming language. The instructions of C consist of terms that are very closely same to algebraic expressions. You may have some keywords, you may have some control statements, you may have some looping concepts. So all the concepts we can implement through C language. C contains certain additional features that allows you to use that language at lower levels. Also, it is acting as a bridge between machine language and an high level languages. This allows C to be used for system programming as well as for application programming. So it may be used for maintaining the system also. It may be used for building the applications also, right? So this is the advantage why we learn C language, right? Moving towards the basic part of C are a character set. How to define variables, how to use that variables. What is the character set of C language? So basically C consists of character set, numbers and special symbols. That has its own importance and that has its own roles and functions. Some special symbols are in the character set are, you may have alphabet from A to Z, that is in lowercase, and A to Z in uppercase, right? Numeric values from 0 to 9, special symbols like ampersand, percentage, arithmetic operators, number of things you may use, underscore, parenthesis, square brackets, braces. You may have number of things that are included in character set of C language, right? Now this character set is what basically they are formed from the character set and they are called tokens. So tokens are what? Tokens are basically, we say that some blocks of C are you have a complete sentence and you divide it into tokens so that the compiler understand when you understand the design of compiler design, right? You have single level or two level, so you may be knowing about the tokenization, how it divides into tokens, then syntactical errors are identified, syntax errors are identified by the compilers. So how it is identified? With the help of tokens only, because tokens are basically nothing. You have the variables, the operators which are used in a statement, they divide that particular part into tokens so that compiler can compile it and find out the semantic and syntax errors, right? These tokens represents the individual entity of any language. the following different types of token used in our, I told you, it could be an identifier, it could be operators, it could be keywords, constants and punctuation symbols too. So these are the tokens that we have in a C language. Then we have the basic part, the first part of C character set, that is defining an identifiers. And I told you in a character set we will be having alphabets and numbers. Right. Now in numbers, like whenever we define identifiers, like in a C program, consist of two types of elements. You may be using some user defined functions, you may be using some system defined functions. So if you are using the user defined functions, you may have to define the identifiers. Identifier is nothing but a name given to these elements. Suppose I want to have a field that is student name. So what is the student name? This is the student name is itself an identifier in which you are going to have some value. An identifier is a word used by a programmer to name a variable, class, function, label, etc. So because it's not a C++, it's a C language, we don't have the concept of class or an object. So we will be using the variables, the different functions or labels too. Identifiers consist of letters, digits in any order except the first character or label. That means you cannot have numbers as the starting number of any identifier. You may have underscore, you may have name characters, but you cannot have numbers at the start. Identifiers consist of letters, digits in any order except the first character should be letter. I told you the first character should be letter, it should not be a digit. Both uppercase and lowercase letters can be used. So you can use, while defining an identifier, you may use the lowercase characters, you may use the uppercase characters too. Then we have some of the keywords. I have shown you what are keywords and why these are not treated as an identifier. So keywords are nothing but system defined identifiers. So I told you these are not user defined identifiers. User defined means you are not going to have like student name. There is any variable in this on my screen, student name? No, because these are the words, these are the keywords that are saved in the memory that has its own special meaning and that the compiler can understand easily. Right. Now suppose I am talking about keywords. Keywords are reserved words of the language. They are also called the reserved words of the language. We cannot use it as user defined identifiers. Right. They are keywords, they are reserved words. We cannot use it as a user identified keywords. Right. Whereas they are reserved words, they are system defined identifiers. Right. They have specific meaning in the language and cannot be used by the programmer as variable or constant. So constant name or variables we cannot define, we cannot use it like for underscore name. We cannot use it like this. We can have for underscore student. We cannot have for is equal to 10. So why it is not identified? Because it is a system defined programming identifiers. Right. Go to is equal to 10. So go-to cannot be treated as a variable which is holding the value 10. It cannot be possible. Why? Because this is system defined identifiers. C is case sensitive language. It means that these must be used it is like uppercase A and lowercase a are different in C language, right? There are 32 keywords in C programming language. So every language has its own keywords and mainly like we are using in C language, there are 32 keywords which are system defined keywords. Then we have variables, the most important part, and we should know what are the rules that needs to be followed while defining the variables. A variable is nothing but a name given to a storage area. Suppose I am taking one example. I am taking the student name, right? I am taking the student name, like I am taking this container and this container is having the value that is A, right? And it has its own the variable name is a. So this a variable is a type of container which holds some value in it has its name also, it has its address also in the memory. And a I have defined it as a. So a is not a relevant name. We can take it as a student name, or we can, I'm just giving you an example. We can take it as a age, we can take it as a date of birth, DOB, we can take it as addition function, anything, but it should have a relevant name. Now let us see what are the different, you may say, what are the different advantages while using these variables, right? Each variable in C has a specific type which determines the size and layout of the variables in variable's memory, the range of values that can be stored within that memory, and the set of operations that can be applied to the variable. So I told you in the previous lectures also, when we are defining any variable, like suppose I am taking it as a character, I cannot perform arithmetic operation like a plus 2. Will it make a sense? No. And if I'm going to ask like the student numbers, like CBSE has announced its result, and they have said like grace marks of 2 can be added to each of the student marks. So you may add like marks plus 2. It makes sense? Yes, because marks is already in integers or in any float value. You can add or you can perform arithmetic operations too on that particular data type. So each data type has its own data type, has its own memory bytes also that is storing in the memory, and what are the operations? They are limited operations that are going to be performed on those variables depending on the type of that variable, right? The name of a variable can be composed of letters, digits, and the underscore character. I told you, you may begin with a variable with underscore, you may begin with a variable with letter, but you cannot have a variable starting with numbers, right? So these are some rules that needs to be followed, right? So let us see some of the examples of data types. What are data types in C? Type is character. Character set contains basically A to is a lowercase a to uppercase a. ठीक है, A to Z and then uppercase A to uppercase Z. Then integer, this is the most natural size of integers for the machine. So you have numbers in that. Floating, when you have some decimal point numbers. Double when you have a floating point number but it has some larger range than float. Then void is absence of any data type. Like it is not, it is treated as a null part, right? Now let us see some constants, and let us see how we define constant, what is the usage of constant, and basically why we use these constants, right? A constant is like an identifier, right? Variable value can be changed, but you cannot change the value of a constant. For example, the pi value would remain same throughout each and every program, that is 3.14. You cannot change it as this time I am using some value and this another time we are using some value. No, pi would remain same for all the programs and for all the functions. So pi value means it would be 3.14 only, right? So it is treated as a constant. So this is an example, a very good example for constant while defining while using this constant. So let us see some integer constants. An integer constant is a numeric constant without any fractional or exponential part. We cannot have decimal point number in integer constant. There are three types of integer constant in C programming: the decimal constant, the octal constant, the hexadecimal. So here we will be like in compilers or computer architectures, you may be learning about numbers. Under that numbers you may be going to understand what is base of 10, what is base of 8, how to convert the decimal constant into octal constant, how to convert octal constant into hexadecimal, how to have base 2. So these are some basic concepts. We will be doing some programs on this also. Then we have floating constant. What are floating constant? A floating constant is a numeric constant that has either a fractional form or exponential form. So I told you, in integer we don't have decimal point number, we don't have fractional part, we don't have exponential part in integer constant. Whereas in floating point constant we can have. Character constants are those constants which are basically having the single value. Like suppose I am taking student name as anything like a single character, and that should be enclosed within single quotes. String quotes constants are also, we can take a string constant and it should be enclosed within double quotes. Then we have escape sequence. What are escape sequence? These are some special, you may say some special meaning in C programming. Right. Now suppose I want to insert a new line in a program. So I may be using some special escape sequence, that is slash n. I want to have a backspace. I may be using slash b. For tabs, like you have tab on your keyboard that maintains some spaces between two words, right? So you may have slash t. You may have vertical tab also. Horizontal tab, you may have slash t. Vertical tab, you may have slash v. Backslash, for printing backsplash, you may have double backslash. So for each of the escape sequence, have you noticed we need to use a single quote while using those uh, escape sequence, plus backslash is used before each of the character, right? Like you may be using null character, that is to end, basically it notifies the end of character. You may be using as slash 0, slash 0, or you may directly write it in capital letter null, null. Then we have operators in C. An operator is a symbol which operates on a value or a variable. For example, plus is an operator to perform addition. So you may have number of arithmetic operations and you need to perform on any two variables or any two, you may say, values directly. So you may be using what? You may be using operators. So C programming has a wide range of operators to perform various operations. Let us understand number of operators that can be classified as arithmetic operators, that includes plus, minus, division. All these operators are coming under arithmetic operators. Then we have this thing, increment or decrement operators, double plus, double minus, for representing the increment and decrement in the program. Assignment, double equal to sign, that is used as a assignment operator. Relational operators or comparison operators, less than, greater than, or less than, equal to, greater than, equal to, all are coming under relational operators. Then we have logical operators. Logical operators are basically and or not. If we have two conditions, let us put some and in between them. Let us make the negative part of the some condition, not this particular condition. So we may be using some logical operators. Then we have conditional operators, bitwise and special operators. So these operators, each of them has its own importance, and whenever we are implementing any program, whenever we are writing any program, we may use one or more than one operators in a program. So let us start with arithmetic operators. I have already discussed this thing. First is plus, addition. Subtraction is minus. Multiplication, asterisk. Division. Then modulus, or you may say remainder part of the remainder. Then we have increment and decrement operator. It is basically an operator which increments the value by 1 and which decrements the value by 1. You may have these operators, like whenever we have these operators, you may increase it by the particular variable by 1, or by you may decrease it also. Like suppose I am taking an example, a is equal to 10 and b is equal to 100. So I am putting plus plus a. So whatever the value of this a is first incremented, then it is printed. So the value of a is 10. So plus plus a is 1 is added to 10, that is 11. Minus minus b. So we have minus minus. So b is equal to 100. We minus 100 by 1, that is 99. So this is how we use increment and decrement operators. Increment means increasing the value by 1. Decrement means decreasing the value by 1. And they are called unary operators also. Unary means they are operated on single variable. Right? Then we have assignment operator. Right? Assignment means, what do you mean by assignment operator? Equal to sign. So basically how it works, let us see. Some value there is in b, and b is the, like suppose b is having the value that is 10. So 10 is assigned to the variable that is a. Plus equal to we can use, minus equal to we can use, asterisk, multiply equal to we can use, division and modulus. So every arithmetic operator and equal to can be used at the same time. Then we have relational operators. I told you relational operators are greater than, less than, comparison operator actually. When we have two statements and we want to compare them. Like 5 is equal to 3, it returns 0 because the particular expression is false. 5 is greater than 3. Yes, it gives you 1. Why? Because basically 1 is representing the true and 0 is representing the false. So 5 is greater than 3. Yes, it is true. So it returns 1. 5 is less than 3. It returns 0. Why? Because it's a false condition. 5 is not equal to 3. Yes, 5 is not equal to 3. So this exclamation sign tells you that not equal to. What it is representing? That is not equal to. Then we have greater than equal to. Greater than equal to matlab, like we have the number 5 is greater than equal to 3. It returns, yes, it is greater than. So it may be like two conditions at the same time. So it satisfies one part. It may be taking as 1. 5 is less than equal to 3. No, it gives you the false part. Let us see one program in C language. First of all, you need to include the header file, that is stdio, that stands for standard input output. That stands for standard input output header file. Then we have int main. Main is the core or heart of the C program, where the compiler first of all jumps to this particular main function and then it works, then it calls the other functions. And basically it is like whenever you call or whenever you have other functions, you may be calling within the main function. So int sum. So you have defined 4 variables, that is of type int space sum, value 1, value 2, value 3, then float space average. And now you are putting some values, you are assigning some values like 2 is assigned to value 1, 4 is assigned to value 2, 6 is assigned to value 3. Then you add all these 3 numbers, right? And then you can take out the average of all these 3 numbers. Then you print. How to print that? Basically we have some you may say when we are using some data types, that data types have in while printing in the on the screen, we may be using /d for integers, /f percentage f for float. So percentage d is to used as a integer value and percentage f is used as a float value. So suppose the printf is a function to print on the screen, print the float value from the rest of the parameter list, right? So it is basically the average of percentage d, comma percentage d, comma percentage d and percentage f. So f, why f? Because the average would be coming in some floating or decimal part. So that's why you have taken it as a float type of variable. So y average is defined as float type because it may consist of any decimal point number, right? So after this, how to print that? That is expression is closed, comma, first percentage d is for value 1, second percentage d is for value 2, and third percentage d is for value 3. And where your average is stored, that is in percentage f, and the variable is average. So this is how it is going to print. Now return 0. Why it is returning 0? Because you have a return type before your main function. You may have void, so you need not have to return anything. If you are taking the return type of main, you need to return 0 for returning as an integer value. This is, then once you have written your main function, then like first braces and second braces. First parenthesis is open, and then you write number of statements, then you close this number of this parenthesis. This is how we write program in C language. Right. So the first part is preprocessor directive or the header file. The second part we have is the main function, which consists of the number of statements that we have in the program and the number of statements which are, why? Because it is all the things are to be included in this particular part only. Like if you are calling some functions, so you may be calling those functions in the main function itself, right? So using variables means you may have number of variables within this, right? So you have defined how many variables, you have defined number of variables in this program. How to use them, that is I have shown in this program. So let us see some more things about the variables and identifiers. Variables have names. We call these names as identifiers. An identifier must begin with a letter on an underscore. C is a case sensitive language. Uppercase or lowercase letters are considered different characters. Average, this average, lowercase average and uppercase average, and even when we have the first A as capital and the other part is in lowercase, they are three identifiers, three different identifiers in memory. Right? Numbers can also appear after the first character. So you cannot use number as a first character while defining the identifiers. However, C only consider the first 31 external identifiers or first 63 internal identifiers significantly. Identifiers cannot be reserved words. I told you special words like int, like float, like main, they cannot be used as the identifiers. Because they are system defined, system programmed identifiers, right? User input. Let us see the user input. What is that? How to write the user input? Let us see. Let's rewrite the average program so that it can find the average of any three numbers. We try it. We no need to see this. Find our three values. Right? Add the values. Divide the sum by 3. Print the result. So you may have number of programs. This is just a example. This is just a type of assignment when you can take the program average program so that it can find the average of any three numbers. So what you are going to do is, first of all, you write the values of three numbers. You need to know the values of three numbers. Then add the values of those three numbers, right? And then divide it by 3, right? And then you print the result. This is how you are having the steps, the logic behind that. The logic behind that is basically you are first of all finding the three numbers, adding the three numbers and divided it by 3, and then you are just printing the result. This is the program for that. We have taken the values, value 1, value 2, value 3. Then we have taken the float as sum and average. We are then taking the input from the user, right? That is finding the value 1, then value 2, then value 3. Then calculating the sum between them and finding the average. Once we have got the average, we can print it on the screen. This is how our program is using the different variables and different operators too, right? So in the later in the coming series we will be more learning about the syntax part of the C language, when we have to use percentage d, when we have to use percentage f. I have already explained, but another, like, I will be making a lecture on more towards the simple programs, how to have a simple, like how to write simple programs in using C language. So I hope you like the session and even understand the basic concepts of C, right? And we will be learning more about C in the coming series. Thank you.